Do this, 1, 2, yeah, okay. So, 1, 2, okay. So I'm planning to start at 10:32 by that clock over there, so in about 1 minute. You can sit anywhere you want. Okay, it's 10:32 and I'm going to start. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Baldwin, for those of you who don't know me. This is actually my first time teaching adult Sunday school here, so please bear with me. If I goof, please be patient with me. Before I do anything else, I just have to call your attention to that tree out there. That tree is incredible. It's got orange and green and yellow, and there's the blue sky. I mean, it's better than any stained glass window. I just want to thank God for that tree. And you planted it, or one of your team did, so thank you, Bob. So, okay, so we're doing this book, the New Testament, in 7 sentences, and I get what I think is the best sentence, which is grace. It's all about grace. What would we do without grace? And we're going to cover grace. I think Pastor Tracy's sermon, for those of you who have already been here, was the best lead up into what I'm going to talk about ever, because it's God's grace and His love that kind of electrifies us. You know, it leads us to repentance, it leads us to turn to Him, and it leads us to sort of reach out to other people and extend that grace to other people. So that's what we're going to go over today. So, go ahead and flip. So again, Bob reminded me that every week we're supposed to remind you why we're here, what we're doing. So this book is talking about 7 critical themes that are all parts of the New Testament. The author says we often study individual stories that Jesus thinks Jesus did, or some part of one of Paul's letters, but he wants us to see the overarching themes. And there are 7 of them that he's identified: fulfillment, kingdom, cross, grace, covenant, spirit, and completion. And I'm right in the middle here. We're right in the middle, and we're doing grace. The title of the book says New Testament, but in many cases, this theme also crosses over into the Old Testament, and that's going to be we're going to see that today. So talking about grace, what does grace mean? First of all, we'll look at the verse. Every one of these verses, every one of these topics has a verse associated with it. And this verse is very famous. You've probably all memorized it, or at least half memorized it. It is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works that no one can boast. I mean, it's a beautiful one-sentence summary of the gospel. The author notes at the beginning of his chapter that the word grace has become very common in our society. Grace, we use grace all kinds of ways, not just this way. It can be the prayer before a meal. Hey, everybody, let's say grace before we eat, right? We say grace for that. It can be the name of someone, Grace Henry, if she's here. That's her name. It's also Grace Kelly and Grace Hopper. Those of you older like me know who those are. Those of you younger may not. Does everyone know who Grace Kelly is? Okay, Grace Kelly. How about Grace Hopper? That's a little harder. Yeah, you would know. She was one of the original computer scientists, Grace Hopper. So Grace is also a name. And it's also a way of moving. You could say Tracy moves gracefully across the stage when he preaches. He goes here and he goes here. So you could say Tracy exhibits grace when he speaks. So that's sort of many ways that grace is used. But in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, grace is very specific and is very powerful. There are two words that are Hebrew words that there's chen and chesed. I did it with the German ch, or the Hebrew ch. So chen usually is translated favor, and chesed has many different translations: mercy, loving kindness, or steadfast love. And one of the beautiful psalms that I remember singing in college. It goes on for 26 verses, but it alternates between saying something about God and then repeating the same refrain, you could say. I'll just read part of it. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love, for his chesed endures forever. Give thanks to God, to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his steadfast love endures forever. So that's the Old Testament version of grace. Let me switch back here. In the New Testament, the Greek word is charis, or I don't know, maybe it's charis, I don't know, which leads to charisma or dorea, which means gift. And Paul, as we'll see later, often uses both of those in the same sentence, the grace and gift. In fact, even in that verse right there, is it by grace you have been saved through faith, and it is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God. Grace leads to a gift. And the important thing, and this is the thing the author of this book says many times, he repeats many times, is that grace is always unilateral. The initiative always comes from God to us. It's not deserved, and it's not earned. God initiates grace, initiates through his generous spirit, he initiates a gift to us. Okay, so let's go to the next. All right, so the author tells a funny story. So he was apparently going for a PhD in Scotland, and he made the mistake of saying, well, the grace of God is unique to the New Testament. The Old Testament is the God. The Old Testament God is the God of wrath, and the New Testament God is the God of love. And his professor in Scotland said, "Come have tea. Let's have tea in my office, and I will explain the Bible to you." And he was a little bit hurt, I'll say, by that. It's like, what do you mean, explain the Bible to me? But as this wise Scottish professor went on to explain, there's plenty of grace in the Old Testament, and we're going to spend a little time on that. So the very first instance of chen in the Old Testament is Noah. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. I was just going to read part of that here. And the Lord regretted that he had made a man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals, creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace or favor in the eyes of the Lord. So it's right there at the beginning. God observes that Noah is a righteous man, and he reaches out to Noah, and he finds favor in the eyes of Noah and decides he's going to save Noah from the upcoming flood. So you could say Noah earned it in some sense because he was obeying God, but it was still initiated by God. Noah didn't know that a flood was coming and ask God for anything. He was just doing his thing, and God initiated a favor toward him. The deeper example is Abraham. So God, repeatedly, before Abraham has really done anything, offers promises to him. He says, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And then later he says, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, eastward and westward. For all the land you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth. And then later he says, Abram said, he's still Abram at this point, says, behold, you have given me no offspring, so a member of my household will have to be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, said, this man will not be your heir. Your very own son will be your heir. And you know how it went. But the key point here, and he brought him outside and looked toward the heaven, number the stars if you were able to number them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And here, the key point, Abram believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So again, God is initiating these promises. Abram is being obedient, but he's not earning this. That God initiates the promises to Abram, and then Abram responds by believing, and that is counted to him as righteousness. So this is grace. Again, this is grace that's extended to Abram, unearned, other than he had to respond correctly, but there was nothing required of Abram before God extended these promises to him. A couple other examples. These actually weren't in the book, but I just thought of a couple others. David, after David sinned with Bathsheba, and he was, I guess, suppressing it or not thinking about it, God initiates Nathan to wake him up and say, hey, he tells him the story, and David gets very upset, and then Nathan says, you are the man, you are the one who did this. Let me read the passage, I have it here. David said to Nathan, after he recognizes his sin, he says, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has also put away your sin. You shall not die. So that's a little bit different. That's grace in response to sin. David had sinned. David was not thinking about it. He was suppressing it. God initiated through grace to warn David about his sin. And David responded properly by recognizing, admitting his sin, and repenting. The last example from the Old Testament, there are many more, but the last one I'm going to give is from Jonah. This is a very interesting example because you all know the story of Jonah, right? God asked Jonah to go to Nineveh to warn these horrible Gentiles that he was going to punish them. And Jonah didn't want to do it, so he ran the other way, right? And then I'm going to skip, okay? So eventually God saves Jonah from using this whale or fish. Eventually Jonah does go, and Jonah realizes that the Ninevites are repenting, and he doesn't like that. And this is what he says. And Jonah prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, is this not what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful." I'm going to say that again. "For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love." There's that word again, steadfast love. Abounding in chesed and relenting from disaster. "Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." So even Jonah, in his negative, bad attitude, knew that God was gracious. And he didn't like that, especially not to those people over there, who I don't like either. So the Old Testament has grace, right from Noah to Jonah, and there are many more examples. So now let's flip to the New Testament. So on the basis of what the author just said and what I repeated to you all, the author claims that no Jewish person in the New Testament time hearing Jesus or reading Paul needed to be introduced to grace. They should have known that, just the way Jonah and the others did. But they needed to be reminded about grace because many Jews at that point would have forgotten about grace. And so when Jesus came into the world, part of his mission was to be grace and truth. So he exhibited grace. And the interesting thing is that he doesn't actually use this word, grace. In this case, it would be the Greek word. He doesn't use the grace in any of his teaching, but he shows grace and he speaks of grace. So Pastor Tracy, I think last Sunday, mentioned many ways that he shows grace. He shows compassion for lepers, for blind people. He shows compassion by going up to them, touching them, healing them. He shows compassion for sinners by hanging around with them, listening to them. Pastor Tracy mentioned the woman at the well, who he's sitting there, and she comes, and he starts talking to her. So this is, again, God is initiating grace to someone, and she's shocked, and anyway, a lot. She's stunned so much that her whole village comes out to meet him because of the grace that he showed by initiating to her. And let's see. And widows. Pastor Tracy also mentioned the widow whose only son had died, and he touches the coffin, and in fact he raises the son back to life. So she didn't ask him to do anything. He initiates grace to her. Okay, then a couple other ones. He speaks of grace indirectly through parables, the most famous one being the prodigal son, where the father in the story shows grace to the son who had run away. When he comes back, the son actually isn't expecting to be any kind of party. He's not expecting the father to be gracious to him. He comes back with a repentant attitude, saying that he would be happy to be treated as a servant just so that he doesn't have to live with pigs anymore. And the father is gracious. The father shows grace to him, throws a party, and welcomes him back eagerly. The author also mentions the story of the laborers in the vineyard. This one maybe isn't so familiar, so I'll just read parts of it. So basically, this guy who owns a vineyard hires people at different times of day, and then it comes to the end of the day, and he's giving out the pay. And I'll just read this part. It says, now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. Okay, so he paid the more recently people who came most recently first, and he went sort of backwards. So they all received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But he replied to one of them, Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last worker as I give to you. So it's sort of a little bit like the Jonah story. The early people are sort of grumbling, like, why are you being gracious to them? They only worked an hour. We worked 8 or 9 or 10 hours. But the vineyard owner is gracious, and he's giving everybody the same amount, no matter how long they worked. Okay, so then Bob, where's Bob? Bob Dahl, there. You showed that really interesting video by Alistair Begg. And that's a very interesting case of grace, right? I mean, the penitent thief on the cross, he didn't do anything other than say, God, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That's all he did. And Jesus, at the end of his life, is still showing grace. He doesn't stop showing grace, even when he's on the cross. I mean, that's sort of stunning, right? So he tells the thief, today you will be with me in paradise. I mean, to me, that's mind-blowing, that even as he's suffering this incredible death, the grace is still coming forth out of Jesus' heart and out of his mouth. And the one that's not in the book, but that I thought of, and this connects to other things that we're saying, there's the story of this woman. This is not a parable, this is an actual event. This sinful woman comes in and weeps and anoints Jesus' feet with oil and dries with her hair. And this is in Luke 7. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, well, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And then after Jesus tells him a little story, he says, therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. So that's an interesting jump to what we want to do next, because the thing, if you remember one thing from everything that I'm saying today, I want you to remember also what Tracy said, that God has given all of us here this huge gift of salvation, plus many more. He's given us, many of us, good health, and God showers us with gifts all the time, with salvation being the big one. And so, just like Tracy was talking about Jonathan Edwards being overwhelmed with the goodness of God and being brought to tears by that, that's what this woman is showing. She's showing Jesus how much he means to her by him presumably associating with her. She comes, she weeps at his feet, and he says her sins are forgiven. And I wanted to mention too that, so Tracy mentioned that other song from Les Miserables that brought him to tears. Does any of you, I'll just ask, do any of you, when you hear a great song, get moved to tears? I mean, I'm one. I'm one. Okay, a pretty good number of you. The one that most recently brought me to tears is the one we now sing here, about the goodness of God. Is CeCe Winans, I think. I watched that on YouTube, I know, a couple of months ago, and I just couldn't help it. I just started crying. I was thinking, my goodness, God has been very good to me. And just hearing her sing it and just the video, it was very moving. So that's what I want us to take away from this. And we're going to go a little further. And actually, this is a good transition. So Paul is one who was shown incredible grace, right? He was on his way to persecute and maybe kill a bunch of Christians in Damascus. And Jesus stops him. Yeah, we'll go to the, thank you. You're tracking well with me. He stops him in his tracks, literally, right? He falls off the horse, and he has this very dramatic conversion story. And Paul never forgets that. Never. The author says Paul is like the chief proponent of grace. And that's not just because it's some theology he learned when he was at the feet of Gamaliel. It's because Jesus showed him that grace. And he just never forgot that. And he says things like, here. Well, he calls himself, I thought I printed that out, maybe I didn't. He calls himself the chief of sinners. Well, no, I know, it's up there, right? Where is it? Yeah, there. 1 Timothy 1:15. Christ came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost. So that may not literally be true, but that's how he feels. He's one of the worst. Philippians 3:18. I have suffered the loss of all things, all his degrees and study and everything, and his comfortable life, presumably, and he counts them as rubbish in order that he may gain Christ. So he never forgets this. Now, the second point there, the greeting, that's an interesting thing I never thought about before. Maybe those of you who went to seminary know this. He says that the traditional greeting in a letter at that time was greetings and peace being shalom. So if you were writing a letter to someone, you would say greetings and peace to you, and then you would say whatever you're going to say. And Paul's letters almost always start with grace and peace. So he replaced greetings with grace, because grace is just such an important element in the new life that he's been given. So I thought that's a small point, but it's an interesting point, and the author makes a big point of that. And then there are multiple times. I didn't realize the author said there are actually 4 different times where Paul is confronted with various, probably well-meaning groups of people in the church who say the Gentiles have to submit to the law, in some form of the law. They, like Titus, who is a Gentile, need to be circumcised in order to do what he needs to do? Do the Gentiles need to follow the law? And there were 2 more. And Paul says no, in a way that only Paul can say. And he says it very strongly. No, that's not right. And I'll just read some parts here. This is from Galatians. This is, according to the author, this is the main reason that he wrote the letter to the Galatians, was to say, no. He says, but when Cephas, who is Peter, came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But when he came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party. And the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him. You see, Paul does not use mild words, right? Acted hypocritically along with him, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas above them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you force the Gentiles to live like Jews? So that's in Galatians. And then in Acts, there's this dramatic moment where Paul is there and he confronts, and they're trying to decide what rules they should give to the church in Antioch. And it says, but some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, it is necessary to circumcise them and to order them to keep the law of Moses. But Peter, jumping down, says, Now therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing a yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? But we believe that we will be saved through the grace of the Lord Jesus, just as they will. And then James, the half-brother of Jesus, comes in and settles it and says, Therefore, my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God. And he says more. So again, this is you know something's important when somebody pushes the other way and you say no. And so Paul repeatedly says, no, this is not right. We don't want to impose the law on the Gentiles. We're saved by grace. Okay, so let's see. Let me take a drink here, right? All right, so I want to turn to today, modern examples. So what about today? We've been talking about the Old and the New Testament. Well, we have a number of songs that sing about grace. The famous Wesley hymn, And Can It Be? One part of that says, "'Tis mercy all, immense and free, for oh my God, it found out me." So mercy, you could say, "'Tis grace all, immense and free." And then the relatively new praise song we sing called All Sufficient Merit goes, "A fortune I inherit by no work I have done." So we sing about it today. Many of our songs talk about it. Grace, I'm going to extend out a little bit outside the church during this section. Grace can often form be an inspiration for people to give money away, to be philanthropic. The phrase often used for that is giving back. Like if you've been blessed by a church or by a school or by some organization, they want you to give back. You give back to their school or whatever it is to thank them for what they did for you and help them do it for more people. Or another phrase people use is pay it forward. You know, in other words, you're giving back to your college or whatever it is to help people in the future. There's a series on the radio called My Unsung Hero, which I like to listen to. It's always a story about someone who was in trouble in some way, and someone that they never even knew came and helped them, and maybe vanished. Maybe they never found out the person's name, but they tell the story about how they were in this situation, and someone showed grace to them. They didn't earn it. They didn't even know this person, but this other person, for whatever reason, decided to show them grace and help them out of their predicament. A sort of a funny thing, Star 99.1 is a Christian radio station in Zarephath. And a couple of years ago, anyway, they were trying to encourage people to show acts of grace. And so they encouraged you when you're going through the drive-thru at McDonald's or whatever your favorite fast food place is, ask the person how much the person behind you owes and pay it for them too. And then when they come forward, then they say, "Oh, well, it's free. The person just paid for you." So that's a little act of grace that was in for a while. This last one is really interesting because, do you all know who Mackenzie Scott is? She's the she's the divorced wife of Jeff Bezos from Amazon fame, because they've split. Apparently it was amicable. I don't know anything about it. I don't believe as far as I know, she is not a believer, but she has been extremely, extremely philanthropic. She's given away massive amounts of money. And just recently there was a article about her that I read, and it actually mentions grace. So I just thought it was interesting to see how powerful grace can be in terms of motivating us to extend the grace further. I have it in the handout, so I'll just read it. So, here we go. So the question was, why are you being so generous? What's motivating you to be so magnanimous with your giving? And she says, whose generosity did I think of when I made every one of the hundreds of gifts I've given so far? It was the local dentist who offered me free dental work when he saw me securing a broken tooth with denture glue in college. So she had a problem with her tooth, and she said, I don't have any money, I'm just gonna fix this myself. So she got some denture glue and tried to fix her tooth. And this dentist showed grace to her and decided, no, don't, I'll just do it for you. You don't have to pay me. Right? It was the college roommate who found me crying and acted on her urge to loan me $1,000 to keep me from having to drop out sophomore year. So she didn't have money to pay for her sophomore year. She needed $1,000. Her roommate decided to give her $1,000. I don't think either of these people is a believer, but it shows you the power of grace. And interesting, so they interviewed the roommate, and the roommate said, I've always said that Mackenzie would have graduated without that grace, but small graces everywhere add up, or big graces when it comes to Mackenzie's giving. So there's that word grace. So I mean, these people aren't believers, but they also believe in grace. And they've seen how grace works. So what about us? So Sunday school is for the mind, but it should also be for the heart too. So I just want to think about, well, what about how can grace motivate us here in Princeton in 2025? We've all been given eternal life and clothed with God's righteousness through faith. I just wanted to tell a personal story about grace. So some of you know that I was unemployed for a little while. I lost my job in November of last year, and I got a new job in April. And I thought after I lost my job that, well, I'm a smart guy. I'm pretty well connected. I'll find a job. I'll be working on January 1st, January 2nd. Well, it didn't happen. So January went by, February went by, March went by. And I was getting discouraged, like a lot of people do. It's no fun not getting any interviews, or I actually had 2 interviews and they went badly. So this was not a happy time in that department. But I had lunch with a guy who remembered me from the past, and he decided he would advocate for me. So he hooked me up among his colleagues, and it was through him that I'm now working at Johnson & Johnson. So that was grace. I didn't really earn that. He didn't have to do that for me, but he decided he would, just like those unsung heroes. He decided to be my unsung hero, and he just advocated for me. So by the time I went in for the interview, I didn't even have to prove my abilities. All I had to, they were just trying to figure out, well, where should we put you? Should we put you in this group or in that group or that group? So I mean, I was kind of floored by that. So that's a recent act of grace that was shown to me. So let's go to the last slide now. At the end of this book, this chapter, he gives an interesting example that I think Pastor Tracy especially, he's probably not here, he would especially like this because he makes these comments about our environment too. Societies, I think, yeah, I have it up there, but I'll read it from here. Societies that are driven by high performance expectations, where success is measured by achievement, will always struggle to understand the grace of God. Right? I think it's fair to say about the general New York area and Princeton area, right? I mean, I think all of our jobs, you know, you're measured by high performance expectations, right? Everyone. So I'll just read what's here. For 25 years, I served on the faculty of Wheaton College. This is the Christian college outside Chicago. These are exceptional professors whose talents were inspiring and humbling. and with us lived 2,500 students from throughout the United States. These were exceptional students in every respect, bright, ambitious, hardworking, and they were as serious about their spiritual formation as they were about their academic achievements. But all of this came with a price. Placing 2,500 earnest students on a campus with 200 earnest faculty meant that performance could suddenly become the measure of self-worth. See, read that again. Performance could suddenly become the measure of self-worth, and that's bad, right? So anxiety was as common as achievement. Anxiety was as common as achievement. In 2010, Wheaton hired a new president who said in one of his opening chapel messages something that surprised us. Wheaton needed to rediscover the grace of God. I'll just stop there. So that's for us too, right? I mean, I think the temptation around the Princeton, New York area is to fall into the same problem, is to fall into, well, if I'm not performing at the highest level and earning money from my company or what it is, writing the best software or whatever bringing in the most sales or whatever it might be, or getting the PhD, then I'm not worth anything. And that's Paul would say, no, that's not true. So the last part is sort of an open thing. I just maybe use this as the Q&A sort of part. What are some things that we are doing or can do at Stonehill Church to be a church that exhibits grace, both among ourselves and to new people who come more recently or new people who are just visiting for the first time? I've listed a few things, but I'd like to open it up to any either stories of grace that are shown to you or ways, things that we can do, are doing, or should do to follow in Jesus's and Paul's example. So I put forgiveness. Those are the hard ones, right? Is forgiving someone who's hurt you. But if you can do that, that's an incredible act of grace. Reconciling with someone, showing hospitality, just listening to someone, just sitting down. I think the women's, Amy's mom, recently said at some meeting they were given Starbucks coupons so that they could have one-on-one sessions with one other person. And so Amy's mom did that recently. I mean, that's a small thing, but you're sitting down and you're showing grace by listening to someone, which maybe no one ever listens to them, and you're spending an hour with them at Starbucks or wherever you go, and just welcoming. So I'll stop there. I'll stop talking. Go ahead, Fitzroy. Maybe we need a mic so everyone can hear. You have another mic? Okay, I'll just repeat. All right.
Yeah, so I guess I need to speak now. Yeah. So, just thinking about grace, before, and importance of, I think, of making contact in terms of being willing to give grace to someone else in a situation. You mentioned Mackenzie. One of the things that I read about her is that she's also an author.
Yeah.
She's a columnist. And she worked very closely, before she wrote the first book, with Toni Morrison.
Yeah, that's right.
Toni Morrison was a very famous African American.
Right.
And I think she might have been, she worked on her to support Accenture's writing. And I really wonder how much that contact with Toni Morrison, who had a very African-American centric writing, her literature was very focused on Africa. I wonder how much that contact with her led her to the generous gifts that she has given to Black colleges. 17 million.
Yeah, she has, that's true.
$40 million, just overwhelming generosity. I just wonder, speculating a little bit. The second thing I'd like to say is, if I have been to a few poor Black churches, and when I've been to them, one of the things that strikes me is how much time they spend in the service giving thanks for just having food on the table, or having a job, or having your car fixed. How much that gives you a perspective counter to what you just said about, quote, Princeton area. It's not an area, it's not some subgroups within Princeton, but the whole idea that I have achieved, I am
Okay. All right, so for those who couldn't hear Fitzroy, the first part was, this was also in the article that Mackenzie Scott was her I guess, thesis advisor was Toni Morrison, who was a famous African-American writer. And he wonders if his contact with Toni Morrison might have helped to influence her, specifically in her generosity towards historically black colleges and universities. So that was one point. The other point was Fitzroy's experience with African-American churches, which generally are poorer, is that they spend a lot more time in their service giving thanks to God for simple, the basics, for having a car, for having a job, for having food on the table. And maybe that's something, I guess implicitly you're saying maybe that's something we could foster here too. Thank you. Anybody else, a comment or a way that we can or should show grace in our church here? I think we work at it. Go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah.
And not just in a very casual way, but understanding that unless God did that for me, I wouldn't be saved. And
Right.
He desires for all to come to the knowledge of the truth and be saved.
Right.
He tells us to pray, and we can persist in that believing, but that really is only, that's God's grace. That's us experiencing God's, I think it's
Yeah.
me experiencing God's grace when I'm praying for somebody, because I know, that brings me to tears because I know what He's done for me. That's how it's going to happen.
Yeah. So Carolyn is saying that another thing we can do is be faithful and persistent about praying for those either who have never heard the gospel or those who maybe have heard it but who have left, who have departed and are being prodigals or rebelling in some way. And actually, I think you weren't here last Sunday, but last Sunday, Pastor Tracy told the story of George Mueller, where he had 5 people he was going to pray for, and he prayed for them consistently through his life, and it took years. I think by the time he died, 3 of them had converted, I think is the word they used. And then 2 of them actually became Christians after he died. So he was persistent in praying for them until he died, and then he didn't even see the last 2 come to the Lord, but they did afterwards. So anybody, go ahead, Ray.
I think one thing also, which I think we do really well, is new people coming into the church for the first time, making sure they feel welcome, don't treating them like an outsider, really trying to, foster communications with them and, make them feel like they're at home, not that this is our home and they're coming in.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. So Ray's saying he thinks we're good at making visitors feel welcome, that this can be their home too, that it's not that this is our club and they're sort of coming as observers to our club, but everyone's welcome to be part of our community. We have a couple more minutes. Any other ideas or stories of grace? Okay. Oh, go ahead. I don't know your name. What's your name? Marianne? Okay.
Get back what he was saying about African American and grace and poor people. It is true. The poorer you are, the more graceful you are, the more thankful. Because, if you chase the world with money and technology and all that, you're never going to be happy. Like King David was never happy, and he had everything.
Yeah.
So it's like the less you have, the more content you have, the better you have. If you chase the world, the bigger job, the bigger house, better degrees, whatever, you're never going to be happy because it's just like worldly things. But if you focus on core things and actual things, you're gonna. If you focus also on what Christ gave you, like I had to learn the hard way. One of the part of grace is forgiving someone who hurt you and still show up for them. You still show up and you still serve them and give them. That was hard. I had to learn that. And then, even when they hurt you, disappoint you, or betrayed you, you still show them grace. You only get grace because Christ in you. If you don't have Christ in you, there's no grace.
That's
and
right.
there's a lot of people in the world that are broken. So many people are broken. So we
Yeah.
because we have Christ in
That's
us.
right. Yeah.
And
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Marianne, is it? Yeah. So Marianne had two things. One is that that it is very true that people who have less can be a lot more thankful for the little that they have. That she said that if you're chasing after worldly goods, you can be so consumed with that that you become oblivious to the many gifts that you already have. And the other thing was, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What was the second thing? Forgive. Oh, yeah. And yeah, that's on the list there, the top one. Being able to forgive and reconcile with people. I mean, that's probably the hardest one on the list. But if you can actually do that, if you can forgive people for the hurt that they've caused you, mostly because of Christ has forgiven you and removed the guilt from you, that's a very powerful form of grace. Okay, we've hit our 11:15 mark, so unless there's something else, I'm going to close in prayer. All right. Lord, thank you for this lesson. Thank you for this book. Thank you for all that we've talked about. We do pray that you would make this church a church that does show grace to within ourselves, in our small groups, in our small associations, but also to people from the outside, including the thing that Penny Stone talked about, showing grace by giving gifts to children that otherwise wouldn't get them at Christmas. Just all those different ways. Help us to be a church that reflects that aspect of your character. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.